I think so often we follow in our father's or our mother's footsteps.
We're told, go to school, get a degree, get a job, and now you figure it out.
Right.
And then what happens for the majority of people is you end up broke, you end up struggling financially, and you can never figure out why.
That's why I think the internet's really powerful, is you have an opportunity to now choose the family footsteps you want to follow into.
The reason why people are broke, or people lack the money they should, because they don't know how to operate money. They don't know how to spend money. They don't know how to invest money. They don't know how to save money. They don't know how to lend money. Okay. Those are 4 important things.
I was never taught about wealth. I was never taught about investing. I was never taught about this sort of financial education. But why aren't we taught this? And that's when I realized it's very profitable to keep people financially uneducated. It's profitable to keep people poor.
So if you don't invest your money, then you're now saying that the only way that I can grow my money is based on what I can physically do.
Right, time for money.
Right, time for money, which is never an even exchange, because you can't work 24 hours a day, but your money can.
Well, wealthy people don't do that. Wealthy people are not working to climb the corporate ladder. They're working to own the corporate ladder. But if you only rely on your salary, you're just one step away from being broke. Because if you lose your job, something happens to you, you can't work, or your company goes down, you lost your salary, and now you have no income coming in, and now what? You're scrambling for a job, you're going into credit card debt, and now you're trying to figure out, how do you make things work?
I hated my current existence. And so I think some people don't hate their current existence enough. You either have to really believe that this thing's going to happen, or you have to know that your life sucks. And I knew that my life sucked. And so I knew that if I did something else, it would have a higher likelihood of changing my life than not doing something.
I read a stat that said most people spend $1.04 for every $1 that they make. So now we're spending more money than we actually have. And then most important is just buying things we don't need. Do we need every pair of tennis that come out, every pair of J's that come out?
They want to keep you spending money on their credit card, because now they'll get to earn 18 to 25% in interest every time you spend $1.
Right, so I think having that financial fortitude not to spend on those things that you don't need, that'll catapult you to the more things you can invest in.
As you start to go down deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole, you start to realize, oh my God, everything that I've been told is a lie. If the banks lived by their own advice, which is save money, the banks would be losing money. When you go and deposit $1,000 in the bank, that cash that you deposited is a liability for the bank. They want to get rid of it as fast as possible. And the way they do that is by lending it out, because it's an investment for the bank. They don't want to hold on to cash, but they want you to save your money. Governments want you to be financially uneducated, because when you're financially uneducated, guess what? You are an employee and you're a consumer. Who pays the highest taxes? Employees and consumers.
Putting our money in a bank, thinking that the bank is the safest place to have our money, right? That's probably the most dangerous place, because I always say $1 that's not moving is $1 that's losing. Well, because the more they print money, the more your money loses value, right? The more inflation goes up, the more your money loses value. So $100 spent in 2019, that same $100 now takes $109, right? So your money is lost. You need that
to buy
much
the
to buy the same thing.
Money as we know it is fake. Our dollars are just pieces of paper. I grew up thinking that our paper dollars are like the holy grail. You want to save this money because it is the most valuable thing there is. As I became older, I started to realize that that's not the case. Our paper dollars are just pieces of paper. It's fiat currency, which means it's issued by the government, and the value is backed through the strength of the government. Second thing you got to understand is, what do wealthy people work for? Elon Musk, he's probably the biggest example of this. He never got paid a salary running and owning Tesla. He got paid in stock options. But the stock options that he gets, or originally got, were at $6 a share. So when the stock went up to $1,000 a share, and he was given millions of these stock options. Now, he has on paper a lot of money, but that money isn't in his bank account. So what he does is, instead of selling it and having an income, he goes to the bank and says, hey, I have these stock options which are worth billions of dollars. How about you give me a loan at 3, 4, 5% interest? No bank is going to say no to that. He takes that loan, pays 3 to 4 to 5% interest on it, And if his company grows, his stock value grows by 6%, he just made a profit on that. He didn't have to take any money out, never took an income, doesn't pay any taxes, and is able to now spend his money, live free, buy whatever he wants, live rich, and not pay a penny in tax.
So if you're young and hungry, look around you and see what you pay for and what you currently utilize already, and then try to get a percentage of that business, if not buying the whole thing.
But I'm currently working in a job. I'm 25 years old. I've got, I don't know, $7,000 in the bank, £7,000 in the bank, whatever. What would you recommend my first step be, Cody? How do I get out of this job? I'm not a pro.
Tell me what you do for a living.
I do content.
Perfect. So if you do content for a living, what I'd say is don't buy a laundromat. I talk about laundromats. I actually need to change that. I need to tell somebody I bought a different first business, because it's a terrible business to buy. It just was my first one, and it's very easy to understand. So I'm like, if you can't understand quarter, machine, close, clean, don't buy a business, any business. Just forget you heard me talk about anything. And so that's why I talk about laundromats. But if I was going to do it the pro way, I would say you should use your unfair advantage. And if you're in the content business, don't buy a boring business in the traditional sense. Look around you. It's something I call my personal P&L review. So I would basically look at, what do I spend money on already? If you're in content, you probably spend money on ad purchasing, right? You probably spend money on video production. You probably spend money on, maybe you rent a set space. You have all these expenses around you. And what if you could turn one or two of those expenses into an asset, not a liability? Thing that makes you money, not a thing that costs you money. And so, I did a deal back when I was doing more video production in my last company, where I bought a podcast and video production company. And I did that deal basically for $0. I think I put $10,000 down for that deal that ended up doing about $300,000, $400,000 a year. That's what I would do if I was you.
You have to have a belief system that is both true and optimistic. Personal responsibility is true and wildly optimistic. And it is people's belief system and the value system that they cobble together over a lifetime that will lead them to reject that. And all I can say is reject it at your own peril for the following reason. Personal responsibility is about remembering you can do something and change. You can get so good at something that no matter how much people hate you, no matter how much they're training and trying to defeat you, they can't. And that is the most exciting thing in the world to me.